even if the dead team can't fix her bugs. Morpeah stands as a pretty interesting unit. She produces 2 summon units at a time and even has a preemptive function. Her summons can be directly controlled and even has a knockback function. This makes her turn 1 very flexible. That said, she is a weird unit and doesn't quite fit into traditional party setups very well. But before we get into that, let's talk about what we'll be going over. You guys seem to have enjoyed the previous video about Teresa, so I decided to add more to this and make it more structured. On screen, you'll see a visual guide that details my overall review. In this, we'll go over her combat niche, the minimum invested needed, viability in game modes, then cap it off with the overall account value. This will be ranked by a 1 out of 10 scale, 10 meaning they're a must-have costume, a 5 meaning they have good value but not a priority, and 1 meaning skippable. Since Brown does 2 values making you use your entire roster, we probably won't be seeing a lot of 1s. At least I hope so. If this new format works for you, let me know by booping like button. So to go over her niche, she is a water element DD unit. DD in this case stands for damage dealing. I know what you guys are thinking about before. That's just on the surface though. When you take into account that you get 2 extra units that you can control and maintain, you realize the options you get from this skill is currently unmatched. The summons can be used to tank damage, adjust positions through their knockback, and just generally do good if not great damage on water season. The multipliers are disgusting at +5, which is 700%, and since there's 2 summons, that's 2 hits. Her magic attack stat is on the lower end compared to other magic units, but with a multiplier that high, who cares? Now, here's some caveats. Let's go over the obvious first. Her SP cost is very high. Secondly, the grid range of her summons aren't the greatest. So turn 1 sweeping with her isn't easy, and you will likely need a second DD unit to get the job done. Fortunately, Levia's damage is pretty good on her own, and this may be all you would need. If that isn't the case though, it can get really tricky. On the not so obvious con list is the summons do not attack on the same turn they are summoned. This can be bypassed by using the preemptive option, allowing them to attack turn 1, which is what matters the most. Also, the summons copies Morpheah's stats before the battle starts to a 1-to-1 ratio. This means that the stats you see on her gear page is the stats you will see on the summons. These summons do not copy buffs. This means you have to buff the summons while they are on the field. This basically raises the stocks on Helena's value even more than it already is, since her rotation between B idol and top idol perfectly synchronizes with Morpeah and her summons. Auras also work around this problem, which means Diana is still top tier. And you can resort to debuffing the enemy, which means Levia or Celia works well with her as well. These cons do compound together into showing that you will need to build a team around Morpeah's gimmick. Helena is her best support unit, period. The synergy between them is perfect. After that though, you mostly had to worry about generating enough SP to summon every player turn. This is pretty restrictive on team compositions, though it is only if you're not going for the turn 1 sweep. If you are, all that matters is having the coverage to take out everything at once. In ways, this makes Morpeah even more flexible since her summons can be moved around to take out key enemies that your large AoE nuker cannot hit. It also cannot be understated that Morpeah is a hard counter to evasion units and counter units, since self-destruct bypasses evasion, and counter doesn't matter since damage goes through anyways. This means you may be able to keep Shara bench in favor for another unit. Overall, I would say her pros outweigh her cons by a good amount. Her minimum investment is pretty unique. Since getting dupes only buffs her summons damage, this technically means you only need to upgrade to the point where her damage is worth it. Since the only real competitive magic water DD unit is a collab unit, this kind of means her only competition for the less fortunate is Shara, and Shara is only decent at damage. In fact, at +4, Morpeah's multipliers are already outdoing a maxed out Shara and her strongest costume. Now, in terms of minimum investment, you can honestly get away with +2, but I would recommend going for +3, just in case you want to use her outside of water season. What's far more important is unlocking her potentials, particularly the -1 SP and the -2 cooldown. Without these, she basically can't be the hyper carry that you want her to be. The damage reduction potential doesn't really matter for PvE content, so unless you're a PvP fanatic, I would keep that low priority. Speaking of PvP, I will generally not be associating my ratings with PvP going forward, mainly because I'm bad at it, and the other reason is because the meta tends to shift a lot, and how good a unit is tends to depend a lot on what the meta is. But I will say something if my PvP-centered players do let me know of something. In this case, Morpeah does have the potential to snap the current meta in half. Her summons are just surprisingly tanky, and they're also obliterating stall teams. It's still too early to make that call, but I would keep this in mind if you want to climb the ranks. Right now, she is terrorizing the PvP matches. Just do keep in mind we are in water season. As for her viability in PvE modes, she is a shoo-in for Tower of Salvation. And any tower, really. Even with Tower of Wrath, you can use her summons to tank enemy attacks and adjust the enemy formation with knockbacks. In Fiend Hunt, she can be difficult to use because of her SP costs, and also positioning her summons can be kind of lame if you're trying to take advantage of Diana's aura. The only mode where she is completely unviable in is Last Night, because her summons are considered a separate unit from her. And since the turn count is capped at 20, they do not get added into the lineup, making her useless. Overall, Morpeah is the strongest magic DD unit, but that isn't saying much considering the competition. In terms of general water DD units, she falls short to only Sylvia, who is literally one of the strongest units, period. That said, Sylvia does require a turn to set up in order to outdo Morpeah. So in terms of turn 1 sweeping, Morpeah still outdoes her. Keep in mind though, this is only in terms of damage. Sylvia obviously has an extremely well-rounded kit, so I would say a fully invested Sylvia is still more valuable overall. All of that said, Morpeah gets a solid 8 out of 10. Her value can go up if she gets a second costume, but with the way how she works now, she doesn't need one. Her main issues are her low magic attack stat, her bad exclusive gear, and her playstyle making her somewhat rigid in anything that isn't a turn 1 sweep. So I imagine the stocks in her will go down outside of water season. Nonetheless, she is a strong boost to your account and gives so many options. If you don't have a well-invested Sylvia, she's the best you're going to get out of the water element. But that's all I have for you. Let's hope Morpeah is just as good. Take care.